Our tale begins at a time when humanity faced extinction, accompanied by the sudden appearance of the malevolent Godwin Drake in the skies. Numerous beasts wrought havoc across the land. The creatures spread to annihilate every human in sight. Then, a mysterious force emerged, causing the monsters to burst into pieces. Drake roared with fury. Humanity's final hope emerged. The strongest mages stood against the wicked god. The monsters charged towards the mages and our protagonist. Positioned at the forefront, our hero commanded comrades to ready their magic spells. He directed them to unleash their spells upon the monsters, which they promptly did. Challenging the evil god, he declared that Drake's demise was imminent. He activated a complex spell, fusing all 6 magic attributes to launch a simultaneous attack. He struck Mandrake with his powerful elemental burst. Other mages urged support for our protagonist, Setsuna, and promptly launched their assaults. They targeted Venerate as well. The man smiled, hopeful that their plan was effective, as they awaited the dissipating smoke. Yet Bindra emerged unscathed from the smoke, unmoving. The mages were incredulous. The man gathered his magic power, shouting to focus on defeating Vendre Carter. Despite others' eagerness to attack, he urged them to wait and observe. He observed his comrades' magic powers heading straight towards Drake. However, the attacks dissipated before reaching their targets, leaving them stunned as their magic was nullified. Benedict taunted them, questioning if their efforts were their best, likening them to squirming insects in his garden, and mocking them as foolish and pitiful creatures. The group was horrified to realize that their magic had no effect against Mandrake. One of them demanded orders from their leader. Kirsten panicked, desperately searching for any remaining options. Suddenly, a member of their group behind them was swiftly killed. They then noticed they were encircled by a swarm of various monsters. Kane's companion Lee stuttered that she was running low on mana. Abruptly, 2 members were seized by monsters while pleading for help. Another woman, engaged in combat, was devoured by a monstrous frog, leaving everyone horrified. He unleashed his full magical power against the monsters, shouting at them to cease their onslaught. However, Minaric appeared behind him and launched an attack. In a matter of moments, all his comrades lay dead, and he himself was gravely wounded. He struggled to sit up, determined not to yield. To his horror, he witnessed their surroundings ablaze, with all humans slain and monsters feasting. Clenching his fist, he questioned if this was humanity's defeat. Rick retorted that their efforts were in vain. This renewed his resolve, believing that their defeat was not yet certain. He cast a spell and struck Windbreak with a powerful punch. Despite Rick blocking the blow with his arms, he screamed in pain and was injured by the attack. Surprised by the effectiveness of his attack, he pondered how such basic magic could inflict damage on Vine Rick. It dawned on him that he might be able to defeat the evil god using just this spell. However, he realized this revelation only in his current state. Rick raised his hand to strike back, declaring that this was as far as he would allow him to go. Suddenly, the pendant around his neck glowed brightly, reminding him of the gift from the headmaster. Recalling his conversation with the headmaster about the pendant, he asked if it was indeed the Necklace of Rebirth. The headmaster confirmed it, explaining that the necklace held the power of the Spirit of Time, granting him the ability to rectify one past regret. He admitted to the headmaster that he had never experienced regret before, and questioned if the necklace would be wasted on him. The headmaster chuckled at his remark, but assured him that he would likely need it in the future. Gripping his pendant, he contemplated his potential regret. Clutching his pendant, he reflected on what his regret might be. He cried out that his regret was not choosing that magic at that critical moment. He then confidently declared to Windbreak that he would surely emerge victorious this time. Suddenly, he found himself back at the school. As he opened his eyes, a man behind him tapped his back, snapping him out of his thoughts, reminding him not to space out because it was his turn next. Turning around, he recognized the man as Leo. Recollections flooded back. He recalled that Leo was supposed to disappear before the evil god's emergence. Glancing around, he questioned whether the surrounding structure was indeed the Magic Academy, realizing with astonishment that he had truly traveled back 10 years in time. Determined, he swore that he would not allow their previous defeat to happen again, and vowed to secure victory against the evil god. Leo then reminded him that it was his turn, indicating they were at a ceremony of blessings, prompting him to apologize and proceed to the stage. He walked directly towards the man at the stage. One of the students, Whispering Lee, asked if he was the greatest genius in the history of the academy. The lady replied that she had heard Setsuna possessed magic affinity for every magic path. As the man opened the magic book, he instinctively covered his face as pages flew out, revealing the various paths and techniques required to activate magic. Understanding that different techniques were necessary for each magic path, they had to choose a specific path, making learning diverse magic challenging. This decision was akin to being unable to believe in two gods simultaneously. The man then called his name and instructed him to choose the magic path he desired. Pointing to one of the symbols, the man asked if he was certain about his choice. Recognizing it as a symbol for long-range magic, he understood that typically, this was the preferred choice, due to the ability to craft elements from mana and aim them at enemies with a reduced risk of counterattack. Long-range attacks were usually sufficient to defeat most enemies. Reflecting on his past as the strongest mage in the world with long-range magic, he realized its ineffectiveness against the evil god. He decisively turned away from the long-range symbols. Walking towards a symbol positioned to the side, he halted at the sharp symbol. This action shocked the man and prompted whispers of disbelief among the students. Leo questioned his decision, recalling that morning he had declared his intention to choose long-range magic. Leo pointed out that opting for close combat magic, considered the least favorable choice, seemed contrary to his earlier declaration. The man explained that the close combat magic path primarily focuses on enhancing the body and limits attacks to close-range combat. He also mentioned that this magic path had been abandoned and compared it to entering a battle armed only with a stone axe against opponents wielding bows and arrows. The man asked him if he was willing to throw away his future. He remained silent in response because he was already aware of the grim prospects as a mage specializing in this magic path. However, it was the only choice to defeat the evil god, Vine Rick. Determined to achieve victory, he knew he had to commit to this path. The man and the students stared at him in horror. The headmaster regarded him with seriousness. Despite the reactions, he reached for the close combat symbol and chose it. The symbol was marked on the back of his hand, as he envisioned using this path to confront and defeat the evil god. Upon seeing the symbol successfully marked on the back of his hand, he smiled confidently, yet the students were horrified as they witnessed his choice of the close combat path. The man then closed the magic book. Cyrus Arclight, head of the long-range magic department, trembled as he spoke to him. He expressed his intention to entrust him with all his knowledge had he chosen long-range magic. Cyrus then shouted at him, stating that he could have become the strongest mage, and that even glory was promised to him as his mentor. However, he simply turned away, understanding that glory would hold little meaning in 10 years. He is aware that humanity will face defeat in 10 years, and that the evil god will appear in 5. Stepping off the stage, he glanced at his symbol, knowing that while he possessed theoretical knowledge, he lacked practical experience in close combat magic. He also ponders how he will develop his close combat magic before the evil god's appearance, completely unaware of Cyrus's simmering anger. Moments later, the announcer directs the second-year students who completed the acquisition rite to proceed to their respective field classrooms. Looking around, he wondered where the classroom for close combat magic was, and noticed Leo's absence. He then approached a man and asked if he could show him the way to the close combat room. However, the man was clearly shocked to see him. The man quickly made excuses and hurriedly left with a woman, avoiding any conversation with him. Observing the students whispering about him, he felt their eyes on him. Overhearing some students comment that it was all over for him and he would learn his lesson for choosing such a path to stand out, he realized that simply by choosing close combat, the way others treated him was markedly different from before. Despite the gossip and stares, he resolved to ignore them and determined to find his classroom on his own. Recalling that there should be a campus map in the courtyard, he made his way there. As he walked, he suddenly heard someone shout, "Fireball!" and he was shocked, wondering if there was a fight happening in such a place. He then witnessed a lady being pushed. She shouted at the men to give back her precious brooch that her mother had bought for her. One of the men held up the brooch, asking if it was a magical tool for storing money. Another man remarked that it was too good for someone like her, a commoner, but they intended to make use of it. Setsuna recognized that the victim of this bullying was from the close combat department, while the 3 aggressors were from the long-range department. One of the men unleashed fire, suggesting to the lady that she should take the brooch back by force if she wanted to reclaim it. Using her basic close combat magic, she hurled fireballs back at her attackers. Dodging the incoming fireballs with all her effort, Setsuna observed her employing fundamental close combat techniques, a physical enhancement that boosted her physical abilities. However, Setsuna realized that despite her efforts to dodge, the distance between them was too great. She conjured something with her magic, passionately declaring to the bullies that the brooch was a cherished item her mother had saved for years to buy, and she would never surrender it to them. Creating a blade from mana, Setsuna recognized it as a manifestation of close combat magic. A mana blade. The fire mage jeered, claiming her efforts were futile, and continued to hurl fireballs. mocking whether her blade could ever reach him. Unfortunately, one of the fireballs struck her, sending her crashing to the ground. Tauntingly, the man called her pathetic, asserting that nothing she did would ever reach them. The long-range mages, led by the fire mage, launched another fireball at her, shouting that she would likely spend her entire life without obtaining anything similar. Overwhelmed with fear as the fireballs closed in on her, Setsuna summoned her magical power and dashed swiftly toward the men. Seeing him approaching, she extended her hand and thankfully, he swiftly pulled her out of harm's way just in time to avoid the fireballs, leaving the bullies in shock and horror. He then asked her if she knew the way to the close combat magic department, explaining that he needed someone to guide him there. This request left the lady looking puzzled. One of the bullies shouted, asking if he was Setsuna Cromwell, and they noticed his choice of close combat magic, evident from the symbol on the back of his hand. The fire mage incredulously asked his friends if they were serious, and exclaimed that this was perfect. He hurled the fireball in his hand, telling his friend that if Setsuna was focusing on close combat, they could freely attack him. Setsuna approached them calmly, stating that close combat magic might seem weak, but its effectiveness depends on how it's wielded. As he observed the situation, Setsuna noted areas where he could improve. He emphasized to them that the quality of magical energy doesn't necessarily determine the outcome of a battle. The lady shouted for him to stop, warning that those men were seniors and he could be seriously hurt. Ignoring the warning, the fire mage continued to hurl fireballs at Setsuna, taunting the lady that it was already too late. Setsuna focused his magic into his legs, enhancing his leg strength with a physical boost. Effortlessly dodging each incoming fireball, Setsuna smiled, realizing that with his current speed, he could easily dodge magical attacks. Feeling confident in his agility, Setsuna thought that if he could move this freely, he wanted to experiment more. While effortlessly avoiding the fireballs, he taunted the mage, pointing out that he had only been using fireballs and questioning if he couldn't use any other elements. The mage, feeling flustered and unable to respond properly to Setsuna's movements, shouted angrily for him to shut up. Now furious, the mage gathered a massive fireball in his hands and declared that he wasn't joking around. However, when he threw the fireball towards Setsuna, Setsuna simply manifested a mana blade. Using the mana blade, Setsuna slashed through the huge fireball, splitting it into pieces. The mage couldn't believe that his fireball had been sliced apart. The lady asked Setsuna in shock if such a feat was possible, to which he replied that it was a matter of magic versus magic, where the one with superior magical proficiency prevails. Setsuna understood that despite not possessing exceptionally high magical power, his precision in controlling magical energy was what made him potentially the strongest in the world. Examining his mana blade, Setsuna realized it was more versatile than he had initially thought. Combining its power with his speed could significantly enhance its effectiveness. Enraged, the mage declared he would use an even larger fireball. However, the mage's friends cautioned that it was risky and might draw the attention of instructors if they went too far. Ignoring his friends' warnings, the mage ordered them to be quiet and began casting a spell. As he focused on casting, he looked up to see Setsuna rapidly closing in, causing him to panic, but he continued his incantation. Despite the mage's efforts, Setsuna appeared in front of him with astonishing speed, interrupting his spell before it could be completed. Setsuna activated his mana blade and delivered a powerful punch to the mage's stomach. The man collapsed, leaving the other bullies and the lady gaping in shock as he crumpled to the ground. The scene left them all speechless and stunned. Setsuna tightened his fist, feeling confident that within his range, he could effectively engage in combat, even with close combat magic. One of the bullies, sweating in fear, realized that despite close combat magic being considered the weakest, Setsuna's use of it demonstrated considerable power. Setsuna extended his hand towards the men, asking them if they had forgotten something. The bully hastily handed over the brooch, realizing it was wise to obey Setsuna for the moment. The two remaining men helped their fallen friend and quickly walked away from the scene. Addressing the woman, he informed her that he had recovered her brooch. He then handed it back to her, and inquired whether he was correct in assuming its significance to her. Upon hearing this, she visibly relaxed and thanked him warmly. After expressing her gratitude, she carefully secured the brooch back into her pocket. It was then that she realized she hadn't introduced herself and extended her hand, introducing herself as Layla Rosewell just as he was about to shake hands. Layla quickly grasped his hand and shook it enthusiastically, mentioning that she recognized him due to his renowned expertise in all magical disciplines, and wondered why someone like him would specialize in close combat magic. Wanting to explain that it was to confront an evil deity, he hesitated, realizing no one would likely believe such a claim. Instead, he asked Layla if she could guide him to the close combat magic department. Observing Layla's reaction, he inferred that the orientation had already begun and suggested they hurry. Together, they followed a quiet path, noting that the department's building was situated on the edge of the campus, indicating the lesser popularity of close combat magic. She expressed a desire for him to teach her how to create that mana blade he had demonstrated earlier. He responded casually, explaining that it was primarily about mastering mana control, downplaying its uniqueness. Reflecting on the versatility of close combat magic, he realized its potential applications could vary greatly depending on the situation. Contemplating mastery of this magic discipline, he believed it could provide him with the means to effectively counter the evil god's spell magic. His thoughts then drifted to the day he met the headmaster. During their meeting, the headmaster had removed his gloves and placed them on the table, revealing symbols representing two distinct magical paths, a revelation that stunned Setsuna. Setsuna was taken aback by this discovery. He knew that typically, individuals could only specialize in one magical path. Noticing summoning magic represented on the headmaster's right hand was expected. But Setsuna had never before seen a seal on the headmaster's left hand. Setsuna inquired about the seal on the headmaster's left hand, but the headmaster cryptically responded that he would reveal its significance when the time was right. He entrusted Setsuna with the secret of this second magic path due to their relationship. Unfortunately, the headmaster never fulfilled his promise to teach Setsuna this magic. After the evil god emerged, the headmaster was assassinated. Setsuna sensed the peril associated with the headmaster's unrevealed magic and vowed to master it to alter the looming fate of destruction. Layla's voice interrupted Setsuna's thoughts as she pointed out the old building ahead, indicating their destination. They hastened towards the building, Setsuna preoccupied with thoughts of his current situation and how he had gained the headmaster's favor. As they approached the door, they noticed the professor waiting for them. The professor, clearly irritated, sarcastically remarked on Setsuna's tardiness with a woman. Layla attempted to explain the delay, but the professor dismissed her excuses without interest. Despite Layla's attempt to explain, the professor dismissed her reasons, shouting that he didn't care for excuses. The professor then belittled Setsuna, asserting that no matter his achievements elsewhere, he was worthless here. Confronted with the harsh words, Setsuna realized he was already deemed insignificant in the department of close combat magic. Setsuna pulled the professor's hand away, expressing his frustration at the constant rudeness. He questioned whether the professor was indeed the head of the department, and if he took any pride in teaching close combat magic. Enraged by Setsuna's defiance, the professor responded with fury. He demanded to know how Setsuna dared to behave disrespectfully toward his own professor. Setsuna maintained his composure and calmly asserted that he believed there were still unexplored possibilities within close combat magic. The professor, seething with anger, contemplated the need to bring down Setsuna's arrogance. In response to Setsuna's assertion, the professor turned around and challenged him to demonstrate his beliefs. Gesturing towards the students engaged in breaking stones, the professor indicated the ongoing test. A student wielded his mana blade and struck the stone with great force. Disappointed, the student cursed as he failed to even crack the stone. Setsuna queried the professor about the nature of the test. The professor explained that this was the initial assessment to determine each student's rank in the class. The task was to extract a crystal embedded within the black steel rock as swiftly as possible. Additionally, the professor warned that those who failed would face consequences. The professor loudly reprimanded the students, noting that an hour had passed without anyone succeeding in breaking the stone. The students responded, acknowledging the stone's extreme hardness and expressing doubt about their ability to break it using their current magical knowledge. One student loudly suggested that the professor's frustration stemmed from not being promoted, prompting a friend to caution him to speak quietly, since the professor might overhear. The professor, noticing an available rock nearby, issued a challenge to Setsuna to showcase the potential of close combat magic, providing only a 10-minute window to do so. Layla protested to the professor, arguing that breaking the large black steel rock within 10 minutes was impossible, especially considering its size compared to the other rocks. Ignoring Layla's objection, the professor displayed a timer and pointed out that while they were debating, Setsuna now had only 9 minutes remaining. The professor gently pushed Layla aside and approached the stone, examining it closely for a moment. The professor teasingly questioned Setsuna's silence, suggesting that if he apologized and showed deference, he might be granted more time. Setsuna firmly declined, stating that even 10 seconds would suffice. This response irritated the professor, who demanded Setsuna to repeat what he had just said. Layla shouted anxiously, expressing concern over Setsuna's boldness. Dismissing them as foolish, the professor explained the challenges of the black steel rock, emphasizing its large size and high density. He admitted that even he required 30 minutes to break it. Mockingly, the professor reminded Setsuna that he wouldn't get a second chance, and insisted that since Setsuna mentioned 10 seconds, he should deliver within that time frame. Setsuna remained composed, agreeing confidently that he would demonstrate using his mana blade. Focused on proving himself to the headmaster, Setsuna understood that excellence was necessary to earn recognition within the department. Grasping his mana blade firmly, Setsuna thrust it towards the stone, determined not to let trivial obstacles hinder his ambitions. The point of his blade struck the center of the stone, yet it remained unbroken. This prompted the professor to exclaim that his boasting was unfounded, and he pondered the consequences of defying his teacher. Upon retracting the blade's tip, the stone suddenly fractured and burst into pieces. This left the professor bewildered and puzzled. He then presented the crystal to the professor, revealing it took only 10 seconds. This elicited a shocked outburst from the professor. Layla, alongside the other students, found it hard to believe he had achieved it. The students, stunned, questioned his superiority over the professor. Upon hearing this, the professor protested, refusing to acknowledge such a possibility and accusing him of cheating. He indicated Setsuna, contending that the rock was so durable that it wouldn't break even after 10 minutes. Thus, breaking it in 10 seconds clearly indicated foul play. Nevertheless, Setsuna simply questioned the professor's notion of a 10-minute standard for such a rock, and subtly hinted that it might be time for him to reconsider his role and perhaps return to being a student. Enraged, the professor called Setsuna a brat. But then someone appeared behind him and addressed the professor by name, Zachary. This person then grasped Zachary's bald head, asking if he was mistreating students under the leadership of Zachary, who was fumbling in his speech. The person is head professor Lionel. Lionel, yawning, remarked that they were interrupting his nap and informed Zachary that Setsuna hadn't cheated because he discerned the mana flow within the rock and targeted its weakest point. Lionel then criticized Zachary's teaching ability, questioning why he couldn't see through it. This startled Zachary, causing him to jump in fear. Lionel shouted to gather everyone's attention and announced that their professor Zachary was preparing to demonstrate morning guard positioning. Lionel assured Zachary that if he had trained regularly, he wouldn't be at risk of harm. Frightened, Zachary swung his hands forward, acknowledging his mistake and pledging never to repeat it. Despite this, Lionel proceeded to punch Zachary. Zachary, thankfully, shielded himself with his arm and collided with the building door. Setsuna, understanding the immense strength required to break through the Monarch Guard, pondered Lionel's identity. Sensing he was no ordinary figure, Lionel then approached closer. Tapping likely complimented him soon after returning, noting that he wasn't bad at all. This was especially noteworthy given his position in the lower-level close combat department, and Tapping encouraged him to give his best effort. Then Tapping turned to leave. However, Setsuna countered, asserting that his focus on close combat didn't imply inferiority to other departments. He pledged to leverage close combat skills to excel and top his class. Lionel smiled upon hearing Setsuna's declaration. He praised Setsuna's determination and offered to teach him magic if he ever showed interest. As Lionel walked away, he marveled at finding someone who shared his unconventional beliefs. He considered that although they had already selected a representative for the exchange match, a surprising dark horse had now emerged. Later, inside the building, Lionel formally introduced himself to the students and extended a warm welcome to the close combat department. With reluctance, he announced that it was time to designate a representative for the upcoming exchange match. This prestigious event would showcase competition among the 8 magic departments, vying for honor and prestige in a tournament-style format. Setsuna, recalling his past life where he was the victor in the exchange matches representing the long-range combat department, understood he couldn't afford to miss this opportunity again. Recognizing the importance of the moment, Setsuna knew he couldn't let this opportunity slip away once more. While deep in thought, Setsuna noticed fragments of black steel rock scattered on the ground. Lionel informed Setsuna that he wasn't the sole successful candidate to pass the test. Prior to their arrival, someone had managed to extract the crystal using only their fists. Soon, his gaze shifted towards a man standing at the side of the room, contemplating whether those fragments could have been propelled from such a distance. Lionel motioned for Drago Oka to step forward. Drago approached and directly asked if Setsuna Cromwell was indeed present, questioning why someone displaying aptitude in other magic paths would opt for close combat. He challenged Setsuna's decision, questioning why someone with talent in other magic paths would choose close combat. Setsuna began to explain his choice, emphasizing the unique applications of close combat magic. However, Drago loudly interrupted him, demanding justification for Setsuna's seemingly weak physique despite his muscular appearance. Drago boasted about his family's generations-long dedication to close combat magic, highlighting his own 17-year journey of physical conditioning. Suddenly, Drago dashed toward Setsuna and delivered a forceful punch to his side. Remarkably, Setsuna stood firm without moving. The impact of the punch was so powerful that it caused other students to fall to the ground. Drago issued a challenge, adamant that the representative position should not be taken lightly by someone who treated close combat as a mere joke. Setsuna remembered hearing Drago's name mentioned during the representative match before his past regression. Drago was the standout figure from the typically undervalued close combat department. Accepting the challenge, Setsuna boldly told Drago to bring it on. However, Lionel intervened, pleased that they had come to an understanding, and announced that the match would be held in a week's time. As Drago walked away, he cautioned Setsuna against any thoughts of escape during that week, asserting that as a close combat mage, one must be prepared to fight to the bitter end. The onlookers speculated on who might emerge victorious, though one woman questioned Setsuna's odds against Drago, citing his apparent lack of physical training. Layla, concerned, asked Setsuna if he genuinely believed he could emerge victorious. His surprising response was a straightforward no, leaving her in shock. Setsuna understood that he couldn't match Drago's trained physique in his current condition, but he had a strategy in mind. Curious about his next move, Lilia trailed after him. Before long, they reached a forest. Layla was astonished by the sight of a giant tree and questioned the significance of their location. Setsuna revealed that this was his secret training spot, known only to him. With confidence, he declared that this place would make him 3 times stronger. Noting the tree's immense size, she suggested it must be a sacred tree over 1,000 years old. Suddenly, a green light emanated from the tree, enveloping him and causing him to sensate its presence and realize once again that the tree acknowledged him. Curious about the light emitted by the tree, she inquired, and he explained that it was the sacred tree's blessing. He elaborated that this blessing was bestowed only upon those acknowledged by the sacred tree, and with gratitude for this divine mana infusion, he could restore his mana. Furthermore, he shared that while he remained there, he had no concerns about depleting his mana, and essentially could train without worry until he reached his limits. She was astonished, recognizing that Drago possessed innate prowess as a close combat mage. Reflecting on Setsuna's earlier assistance in retrieving her brooch, she felt compelled to reciprocate and assist him now. Therefore, she began scouting ahead, leaving him gazing at her with a puzzled expression. The following day in the training room of the close combat department, Layla scanned the room but was taken aback to witness Drago effortlessly lifting the heavy barbells, leaving her bewildered about what was happening. Believing Drago to be the only anomaly in the room, Drago contacted Lionel and inquired about the whereabouts of the black steel rocks in the yard, prompting Lionel to jest if Drago intended to crush all the rocks. Drago walked away, affirming he wouldn't break them, then positioned the black steel rocks behind him and proceeded with his push-ups, jokingly informing Lionel that he was merely borrowing them. Layla, who was discreetly observing, was horrified at the realization that anyone struck by Drago might meet a fatal fate. She then hurried off, her mind filled with concern about Setsuna's well-being. Meanwhile, in the forest, he sat reclined against the sacred tree, absorbed in studying a martial arts book, when Layla appeared, visibly fatigued, and questioned the appropriateness of his relaxation. Layla reported to him that Drago was performing push-ups with 5 stacked black steel rocks on his back. He acknowledged this, noting that it was expected for Drago to train his physique in such a way, and assured her not to worry because it was part of his strategy. He then focused his mana into studying the martial arts book. Intrigued, Layla inquired about his meaning, to which he explained that physical enhancement involved reinforcing and regulating the nervous system with mana. He informed her that to strengthen specific body parts like legs or hands, one should concentrate solely on those areas. Similarly, to enhance memory, the focus should be on the head. Therefore, if one desires to improve their memory, they should direct their attention towards the head. Afterward, he casually discarded the martial arts book. He stood up, removing his coat as he explained that once they grasped the techniques, they simply needed to apply them. Like a leaf falling from a tree. Noticing it, he swiftly kicked it before it hit the ground. More leaves descended, each shattered by his mana blade. Layla, who observed, was left amazed. Excitedly, she remarked she'd never encountered such a rapid learning method, but he insisted it wasn't sufficient. Suddenly, dizziness and pain overwhelmed him. Subsequently, he collapsed due to exhaustion. Examining his hand, he saw it was bruised and severely injured. However, He assured her he was fine, explaining that he had simply pushed his muscles to their limit with a physical boost. He then focused on enhancing his healing abilities. Within moments, his severely injured body rapidly healed. As he spoke to Layla, he mentioned his capacity to strengthen his body quickly. Concerned, she urged him not to overexert himself, suggesting there must be an alternative approach. He disagreed, emphasizing that he couldn't compete with Drago using half-hearted methods, given Drago's extensive training in close combat magic. He explained that he needed to perform the destroy and reconstruct method 1,000 more times within the remaining week. Layla was left shocked and horrified, asking him how he could endure repeating it 1,000 times when one cycle was already so painful. Despite her concern, he smiled, reflecting that this level of training was nothing compared to what he had endured in the past, reminiscent of his time back in the orphanage. During his time at the orphanage, Setsuna was unable to use any magic. Each day, he dedicated his time to practicing diligently. Despite numerous attempts, he was unsuccessful many times. Nevertheless, he persisted in practicing. Despite the slow progress, he was improving gradually. He then explained to her that as long as he could grow stronger, failures meant nothing. In the following days, they both practiced and exercised diligently. They also trained their skills together. She recalled someone mentioning that Setsuna had natural talent. However, as she observed him pushing up with black steel rocks on his back, she realized that Setsuna had actually been working harder than anyone. The day of the match arrived, with both Drago and Setsuna taking the stage. Drago assured him he hadn't fled, to which he responded that he wouldn't retreat because he was, after all, representing the close combat division. Lionel raised his hand to inquire if they were both prepared, and as tension filled the air between them, Lionel then shouted for the match to commence. Setsuna immediately charged towards Drago. Swinging his hand at Drago, Setsuna's attack was blocked. Adjusting his footing for more power, he delivered a forceful kick towards Drago. Although Drago blocked the kick once more, he was still pushed back by the impact. Setsuna noticed that Drago was utilizing the Monarch Guard to withstand everything. He was astonished when Drago suddenly appeared right in front of him. Drago delivered a powerful punch towards Setsuna, creating a loud explosion upon contact. The impact of the punch caused the observing students on the bench to shield their faces. Layla, feeling concerned, called out his name. They all waited patiently until the haze dissipated. To their astonishment, he managed to deflect Drago's punch. The students exclaimed they were going too far and questioned whether they were genuinely being promoted. He conveyed to Drago that he now comprehended the consequences of taking a direct blow. Drago attempted another punch, but he skillfully evaded it. Prego persistently threw punches at him, and he consistently evaded or parried. Drago, yelling, demanded to know why he was only on the defensive. Nonetheless, he remained silent and kept dodging. Causing Drago to cease his assault, he remarked that ultimately, Drago's body remained frail, and that appeared to be his limit. Despite Setsuna's rigorous training, Layla believed he still couldn't rival Drago. They persisted in their attacks, while Lionel, observing them, discerned that Setsuna appeared to be momentarily pushed back. Drago then lifted one of his feet. Setsuna swiftly moved his hand forward to intercept Drago's foot, leaving Drago visibly frustrated. However, Lionel understood that Setsuna was flawlessly deflecting all the attacks using his mana control. Despite Drago's frustration, he persisted in attacking Setsuna, who continued to defend without retaliating. Drago angrily asserted that elites always disdain close combat, but Setsuna remained silent. Drago then discussed his family background with his father, emphasizing their expertise in close combat and questioning whether his opponent understood the extent of their past humiliations. Drago then forged a Mano Blade, vowing to alter their shared destiny with his own hands. He too crafted a Mano Blade, and they both charged towards each other to engage in combat. Their blades clashed repeatedly, with Drago attempting to strike, while his opponent adeptly evaded each attack without retaliating. Drago repositioned his stance and leapt above his opponent as they descended. Reacting swiftly, he gazed upward and evaded Drago's assault, causing the stage to fracture. Drago advanced towards him, but his opponent held steadfast, anticipating Drago's next move. He countered Drago's blade with his own, gripping tightly to resist Drago's attempt to overpower him. Recalling hearing students whispering that his magical pursuits were futile, and that he had learned a hard lesson about seeking attention, he acknowledged to Drago that he could relate somewhat to his sentiments. As he spoke, he forcefully withdrew his blade, causing Drago's blade to rise into the air. Then, advancing with purpose, he leaped towards Drago to launch his own attack, questioning whether both of them aspired to reach higher goals than this confrontation. Drago, taken aback by his inquiry, witnessed his armor shatter and his Mano Blade disintegrate. Despite this, he simply smiled at the remark and chuckled as he attempted to strike, which his opponent skillfully evaded, smiling in return. He swiftly maneuvered to Drago's side and circled around him. He then utilized his enhanced physical acceleration ability to strike Drago stealthily from behind using his mana blade. However, Drago successfully parried the strikes. As Drago defended himself against the relentless assault, Layla believed their strategy was effective, while Lionel acknowledged Drago's exceptional offense and defense. He marveled at Drago's extraordinary mana control and physical prowess, pondering who might ultimately prevail. Recognizing Drago's impregnable defense, he sought to find an opportunity. Stepping back to increase the distance between them, Drago mirrored his movement. Drago then summoned another mana blade and aimed a swing towards his head, but he managed to evade it just in time by tilting his head back. Drago swung his blade in a backswing to gather momentum before thrusting it forward. He successfully blocked the attack with his blade but was still pushed back slightly by the force. He observed that Drago had depleted all his mana for that particular attack, prompting him to swiftly leap backward, narrowly avoiding being engulfed along with the ground. He realized he was on the brink of falling off the stage, and Drago, presuming he had finally trapped him, doubted he could utilize his famed footwork in that position. Drago then flexed his muscles and let out a confident roar, displaying his steely physique, leaving Layla and the students in awe of the display. Drago charged towards him with his muscles tensed, launching a punch. However, he remained composed as Drago approached, and when Drago's punch landed, it passed through him as though he were made of water. Drago couldn't believe it was merely an afterimage. He then materialized above Drago, explaining that if Drago continued using his mana in the same spot, he would briefly leave behind an afterimage, catching Drago by surprise. Subsequently, he appeared behind Drago, poised to swing his blade. However, Drago swiftly turned around with fists raised, ready to counterattack. Asserting to Drago that it was the end, he delivered a swift slash before Drago could strike back. Layla and the other students were shocked by the sudden attack. Lionel observed that it was a well-timed counterattack, taking advantage of Drago's aggressive stance. With a shout, he declared the match over and announced Setsuna Cromwell as the winner. Layla cheered enthusiastically, but the other students remained in disbelief. Drago struggled to move his hand, attempting to stand up. The students were astonished that despite taking such a heavy blow, Drago managed to stand again so quickly. Drago couldn't believe this was happening and suspected that the final strike of the mana blade had been intentionally non-lethal. Suddenly, Setsuna reached out his hand towards Drago. However, Drago responded by asking Setsuna what he was fighting for. Setsuna gazed silently at Drago for a moment. He explained that he fought to never be defeated by anyone, and to safeguard everything he held dear, vowing to surpass all others in strength. Setsuna swore to become stronger than anyone else. Drago was taken aback by Setsuna's response and acknowledged Setsuna's strength. Drago then accepted Setsuna's hand, conceding complete defeat to Setsuna, who had truly lived up to his reputation. Setsuna's gaze then shifted towards Drago, pondering how Drago's formidable power could significantly aid in the confrontation against the malevolent deity. Lionel approached the duo, remarking on Drago's reluctance to accept defeat in close combat against Setsuna. He raised his hand and declared Setsuna as the chosen representative of the close combat division. Several days later, Lionel informed Setsuna that it was time for the representative to engage in a face-to-face exchange match. He added a peculiar request for Setsuna to conduct himself appropriately, which Setsuna agreed to without hesitation. As they entered the room and proceeded further, he observed a gathering of both female and male student participants. Subsequently, one of the male participants inquired about the presence of a representative from the close combat department. The man then conveyed his initial impression that Setsuna was willingly exposing his vulnerability, but soon he recognized the emblem on the man's hand, deducing him to be the representative of the enchantment magic department. Mockingly, the man referred to Setsuna as the representative of the lowly grunts department, and questioned if Setsuna was unaware of this. He then stepped onto Setsuna's foot, revealing himself as Setsuna's opponent for the first round. The man playfully questioned Setsuna if it was true that the close combat department hadn't won a single battle in the past 100 years. He suggested that they, a seemingly ineffectual group, should confine themselves to a corner of the school building and continue their muscle training until they perished. However, the man yelped in agony as Setsuna retaliated by stepping back on his foot. Setsuna then quipped that it appeared they had a peculiar way of exchanging pleasantries in the enchantment magic department, asking if that was some sort of customary greeting. Setsuna increased the pressure on the man's foot, causing him to curse in pain, labeling Setsuna as a despicable individual. Notwithstanding their century-long drought in victories, Setsuna calmly reassured the man that this year would mark a turnaround for the close combat department. In response to Setsuna's remarks, The man retracted his foot and vehemently demanded an end to what he deemed nonsensical talk. Just then, a newcomer entered the room and suggested that while enthusiasm was commendable, it might be wise to reserve judgment until the match's conclusion. Upon rising to their feet, the student readied themselves to address the gathering. Recollecting suddenly, Setsuna realized that the unfolding scene bore striking resemblance to moments from his past regression. Directing a glance towards the headmaster, Setsuna pondered the familiarity of the situation. They proceeded to gather before the headmaster. An energetic young woman with pink hair eagerly greeted the headmaster, vowing to showcase her full capabilities during the inter-school exchange match. Setsuna identified the lady as Carol from the summoning department and observed that her affable nature remained unchanged. Recollecting their previous encounter, Setsuna remembered Carol as a formidable opponent with whom he had engaged in a fierce battle during the exchange match before his regression. Despite emerging victorious back then, he understood the need for caution this time around. Extending his congratulations, the headmaster commended them for their selection to represent their respective departments, expressing his delight at the gathering of 8 exceptional talents. Additionally, he presumed they were already informed through their departments that the inter-school exchange match would adopt a one-on-one tournament format, with opponents chosen randomly. The headmaster proceeded to announce the lineup for the inaugural match of the inter-school exchange. Close combat magic. Specializing in hand-to-hand combat against enchantment magic, renowned for imbuing objects and life with mana.
The subsequent match would showcase healing magic wielders, creators of miracles who provide support to their allies.
In opposition to long-range sorcery, designed to vanquish adversaries from a distance without allowing them to draw near, the third contest would see formation sorcery, involving diverse abilities within magical arrays, face off against summoning sorcerers adept at commanding mythical creatures from alternate realms. Lastly, the fourth bout would feature enigmatic and distinctive sorcery, opposing alchemical sorcery capable of permanently transforming substances. He elaborated further that the inter-school exchange match serves as a practical educational experience in comprehending the various magical disciplines. The event was slated to take place in 10 days, affording participants the option to either explore new magic or concentrate on wrestling until then. The headmaster expressed his anticipation of witnessing their fighting spirit, to which they all eagerly concurred. Following his announcement, the headmaster departed, and they all bowed in reverence. 4645 understanding that this was their sole opportunity for direct interaction with the headmaster. A moment later, as the headmaster traversed the corridor, a student hailed him. Turning around, he recognized the student as the representative of the close combat department. The student introduced himself and presented a request. He inquired if the headmaster would be willing to teach him his magic if he emerged victorious. The headmaster, intrigued, sought clarification regarding the student's specialization in close combat, and remarked that his summoning magic might not be applicable. Nonetheless, the student specified his interest in another aspect of the headmaster's magic. Departing, the headmaster was taken aback and earnestly questioned how the student became aware of it. Detecting the headmaster's potent mana, he found himself facing a pointed inquiry regarding his awareness of such power. Taken aback by the headmaster's formidable mana, he could sense the wariness emanating from him. Nevertheless, he comprehends that this secondary magic holds promise in the battle against the malevolent deity. There is no option for retreat. He informs the headmaster that while he cannot disclose the rationale, the triumph in close combat after a century could revolutionize the established norms of the world. He queries whether the headmaster should not harbor hope for such an outcome. Despite receiving no response from the headmaster, he maintains an unwavering gaze, refusing to yield. The headmaster remains silent, yet he persists in his intense scrutiny of the headmaster, refusing to falter. At that moment, the headmaster inquires if he harbors ulterior motives, but also concurs, asserting that upon winning the championship, he will impart knowledge of the second magic. Agreeing to the terms, the headmaster pledges to enlighten him about the second magic on the day of his championship victory. Contemplating the headmaster's cautionary words, he acknowledges the daunting nature of the journey ahead. Undeterred by the challenge, he asserts his determination to demonstrate victory in the competition, regardless of the obstacles. With a remark on his resilience, the headmaster turns to depart. Moments later, he finds himself outside, munching on bread, reflecting on a decade of school life and finding his leisure time somewhat dull. As he savors the flavor of the bread, he recognizes its excellence and resolves to express gratitude to Layla for the recommendation. Realizing that only 10 days remain until the event, he understands the necessity of thorough preparation. Suddenly, someone interjects, dismissing the need for such readiness. Without warning, a colossal fist materializes dangerously close to his side. Acting swiftly, he shields his face just in time to deflect the blow. Reacting instinctively, he leaps backward, putting space between himself and the imminent threat. The magician standing nearby confesses that his intention was to execute a surprise attack from an unseen angle.
He queries the magician's motives behind animating stones with enchantments to fashion a golem.
The magician, visibly irked, responds. He sees it as a continuation of their prior encounter, dismissing the need for a formal match. Subsequently, he employs his magic to gather stones. Forming additional golems behind him, he demands to know how he could be so brazen as to publicly humiliate him. With composure, he informs the magician that it's simply the repercussion of his own actions. Suddenly, students emerge from the building behind them. The magician realizes the potential trouble of being reported for what could be perceived as bullying in a close combat scenario. He then retracts the life force from the golems. He departs, cautioning him to better equip himself for their impending match. Recognizing the magician's adeptness, he acknowledges his ability to manipulate a substantial amount of matter with mana simultaneously. Nevertheless, he advises against leaving after causing someone to drop their bread. The following day, within the close combat building, Lionel announces the focus of the day's session: preparation for the upcoming exchange match. They will review the recent skirmish between Drago and Setsuna. Lionel inquires if both participants understand their respective shortcomings, receiving affirmative responses from both. Directing his attention to Drago first, Lionel prompts him to share his reflections. Drago admits to losing control of his mana and emotions. Turning to him next, he confesses his deficiency in basic power and acknowledges his inferiority to Drago in terms of sheer strength. Lionel commends them, emphasizing that acknowledging their weaknesses is the initial stride towards progress. He further advises immediate improvement in today's match. Upon Layla's call questioning if the match serves as training for an exchange match, Lionel responds positively, lauding her inquiry. He elucidates that their first match's opponent is Noel from the Enchantment Magic Department, noting that according to Setsuna, Noel employs multiple golems for both offense and defense. Due to the physical nature of golems, their fundamental combat style resembles that of close combat magic. Lionel proceeds to assign specific tasks for today's match. He directs Drago to prioritize speed and to act as multiple assailants attacking from various angles. He instructs Setsuna to intercept Drago's assaults and respond with counters, receiving a nod of agreement from Setsuna. Moments later, Drago asserts that it won't be a repeat of last time, to which Lionel responds eagerly, anticipating the challenge. Drago charges at him, launching his fist. He calmly waits, tilting his head to the side to dodge the attack. Drago slides one foot to the right, anticipating a counterattack from that direction. Surprisingly, Drago smiles. He is caught off guard as Drago punches from the left, but he manages to block the blow with his arms. Recognizing his slow reaction speed, he acknowledges the need for improvement. Lionel praises Drago for effectively balancing speed and power. Drago swiftly moves in front of him. Launching a punch to the right, he manages to dodge it. Stepping one foot backward, he anticipates Drago's next move, expecting a left hook. However, his surprise arose when Drago unexpectedly punched from the right. However, he skillfully dodged the attack, recognizing Drago's initial maneuvers as a deception. Lionel praised his insight and advised him to flank and counterattack. When he expanded his position, he recognized Lionel's leadership. Deftly dodging Drago's left hook, he responded with a swift right punch. Their training continued. Both fighters eventually ended up on the ground, exhausted. Prigo praised their efforts in the match. Lionel filled them with water, noting the commendable nature of their movements. With a few more days of practice, they could confidently handle 4 to 5 opponents at the same time. However, he warned Lionel that even after being thoroughly trained, they must never let their guard down. Lionel smiled as he watched him absorb the instructions easily, acknowledging Drago's mastery of the basics of melee combat. However, Setsuna's intuition exceeded expectations. After several days of waiting, the day of the exchange match finally arrived. The host officially announced the start of the 87th Elm Ridge Magical Academy exchange match, asking which representative of the 8 branches of magic would ultimately claim the title of strongest contender. The host then asked about the audience's betting preferences, highlighting the limited popularity and betting in favor of Setsuna in the melee division. Despite this, the person who used to create the fireballs expressed optimism for Setsuna's victory by placing bets in his favor. Observant students observed Cyrus accompanying a long-haul representative, prompting speculation as to the identity and role of the person standing next to Cyrus. Some speculated that the person next to Cyrus might be an actor representing the ranged magic division, given the possibility that they would be challenging the winner of the upcoming match. The host declared that the exchange matches would undergo random stage changes, indicating that this time it was situated within a desert. With no hint of a smile, he acknowledged the setting, his response confined to silent contemplation. The students enthusiastically cheered for Noel, mockingly relishing the prospect of him confronting the underdog department. Layla, feeling provoked, retorted to the students, urging them to observe closely and reconsider their perception of the underdog. A smile graced his lips as he observed Layla engage in argument with students from the enchantment department, while Lionel attempted to pacify her. The host then raised his hand dramatically, signaling the commencement of the first match with a resounding shout. Noel produced a piece of black steel rock, playfully questioning if he recognized it. His response was simple. It was indeed a black steel rock, a fact to which Noel concurred. Casting it forcefully onto the sand, Noel elaborated on its significance, explaining that it was a crucial component for constructing a golem through fusion with sand. Suddenly, something emerged from beneath the sand. Instantly, the piece of black steel rock underwent a dramatic transformation into a colossal chunk of gold. Noel asserted that not even a blade could leave a scratch on this black steel gold. Noel then revealed several more black steel rocks from his bag. Tossing them all onto the sand, they too morphed into golems. Noel proudly proclaimed that his odds of victory were 1 in 10. Concerned, Layla inquired about the number of golems. Noel explained that these golems could be endlessly created from the sands, suggesting an insurmountable barrier to getting close to him. An individual on the sidelines arrogantly asserted that the outcome was predetermined before the fight commenced, while others clamored for him to surrender. Noel, brimming with confidence, invited him to speak up if he had anything to say. Speaking softly, he left Noel perplexed, prompting her to inquire about his words. Following, he remarked to Noel that it was tedious, unexpected as his ace. This provoked Noel's furious questioning of what he had said. They commanded their golems to overpower him. The golems charged towards him for an assault. Amidst the stage, a clamor resounded, yet the audience, shrouded by sand, couldn't perceive a thing. Without laughter, but with taunts, they provoked him. Meanwhile, the onlooking students speculated aloud about the unfolding events, hindered by the dust cloud obstructing their view. Simultaneously, the golems that had rushed him collapsed to the ground. With multiple swift movements, he swiftly dealt with the remaining golems. He notified Null of his mastery over the black steel rock. Astonishing revelation. Who could have predicted the resilience of the golems? Absolutely not. He proceeded to resurrect the golems using his mastery of enchantment, boldly asserting his ability to summon as many as he desired. As the golems surged toward him once more, he coolly asserted that in the heat of close combat, proximity magic reigned supreme, rendering their sheer numbers futile against his mastery. In a swift motion, he launched himself towards the oncoming golems, swiftly cleaving them into fragments. With lightning speed, he sliced through the golems using his mana-infused blade, leaving onlookers astounded. Ultimately, he propelled the edge of his mana blade toward the final golem, piercing its head and triggering an explosion of shattered pieces. Noel hastily reached for additional black steel rocks from his pack, only to be taken aback as he came eye to eye with Setsuna, who threw a punch at him, protesting the unfairness of the encounter. Bill was struck in the face, sending him tumbling and skidding across the sand. Meanwhile, amidst the swirling dust cloud, viewers anxiously wondered what was unfolding within its opaque confines. As the dust began to settle, the crowd murmured in disbelief, questioning who remained standing. To their astonishment, it became clear that he emerged victorious, prompting the host to declare Setsuna Cromwell as the winner. He smiled, acknowledging his triumph in the inaugural battle. Meanwhile, Layla cheered, brimming with pride at his accomplishment. The enchantment students watched in horror as the close combat department celebrated an uncommon victory, speculating on the duration since their last triumph, contemplating whether the perpetual creation of new golems would result in an unsustainable output, potentially precipitating the downfall of the nobility, one student reflected. Meanwhile, some individuals voiced their ire, adamantly asserting that the recent victory was a fluke, attributing the success of the close combat department solely to luck. Conversely, Cyrus gritted his teeth in frustration. He adamantly refused to perceive the defeat as a mere act of self-destruction, particularly after observing his instructor's reaction. Upon acknowledging Sid's undeniable prowess, he advocated for the implementation of precautionary measures against him. With the fierce competition intensifying, the second match got underway. Layla, who was praising his performance, was approached by him, where he asked if she planned to watch the next match. Confirming his intention to do so, he subtly hinted at seeking inspiration for his own tactics. He focused on observing the summoning versus formation techniques of the current contenders, while also listening attentively as the host provided updates on the summoning department's representative, Carol. Carol gained the upper hand, while the formation magic representative struggled to close the distance for an effective attack. Despite the formation department's representative facing a disadvantage, their efforts to counter Carol's summoning tactics caught his attention, prompting him to contemplate incorporating similar close-quarters combat strategies into his own repertoire. Observing the maneuvers of the formation department, he pondered the feasibility of integrating comparable close-quarters combat tactics into his own arsenal. Layla expressed her admiration for movements from other magical disciplines, but emphasized her desire to enhance her proficiency in close combat magic. Curious about her choice of close combat magic over other paths, he inquired why she made that decision. Layla recounted a past experience where she was rescued by a close combat mage. Years ago, while playing with her younger brother in the forest, they were attacked by a grizzly bear. Initially feeling helpless, a close combat mage came to their aid. Recalling the incident, Layla remembered feeling hopeless during the bear attack. The intervention of the close combat mage left a lasting impression on Layla, inspiring her to pursue proficiency in close combat magic. Motivated by her desire to assist others and strengthen herself, Layla adopted the dream of becoming skilled in close combat magic. With a hint of shyness, she admitted to him that she felt it was somewhat childish to pursue combat magic because of that experience. He reassured her, affirming that her motivations were far from childish. Encouraging her, he emphasized that as long as she held her goal close to her heart, she would undoubtedly grow stronger. His words elicited a shy laugh from her in response. At that moment, Leo approached and greeted him. Aware that Leo was a former Quest alumnus and the second strongest in the long-range department. After himself, he acknowledged Leo's presence. Leo complimented his performance in the first match, acknowledging his strength even with close combat magic. He then teasingly inquired if the girl beside him was possibly his partner. Leo playfully raised his pinky finger, prompting him to question the gesture's meaning. However, Layla interjected loudly and shyly, correcting Leo by stating that she was just his friend, Setsuna. With that, Layla excused herself and walked away, leaving him perplexed and wondering what had just transpired. He then expresses to Leo his surprise at not being chosen as the representative for the long-range department, emphasizing that if he were in Leo's position, he would have expected to defeat Actor. Leo cautions him that although it might seem like an excuse, he should be wary of Actor's deceitful tactics. Leo elaborates that he himself fell victim to Actor's cunning and lost the representative position to him. In response, he acknowledges and discerns that Actor is the type of individual who will stop at nothing to emerge victorious. He understands the imperative of remaining vigilant. Meanwhile, within a mansion, an individual enters one of the rooms. An Actor proceeds to open a chest containing an undisclosed item. Upon laying eyes on it, Actor's smirk takes on a sinister and unsettling quality. Days later, the host announces to all present that the opening match of the second round pits long-range combat against close combat. The chosen battleground is the scorching hell, where a single misstep could lead to a fatal fall. Drago expresses to Lionel that with such a treacherous stage, the upcoming opponent will prove to be formidable. Lionel agrees, lamenting once again that it seems the stage favors their adversary. On the contrary, Actor confides in Cyrus, stating that such underhanded tactics were to be expected from the head of the long-range department, indicating a level of cheating that comes naturally to him. Cyrus responds by affirming his determination to thoroughly teach Setsuna a lesson, and vows to make them regret opting for close combat sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, in Setsuna's room, he warns Layla against touching the vase on his table, leaving her puzzled. He proceeds to explain that the vase is a magic tool activated upon contact, capable of draining her mana entirely. Shocked by this revelation, Layla questions why he would place such a thing there. Setsuna sighs and responds that it's a trap targeted at him, marking the seventh one. Learning that it was the seventh trap, Layla was horrified and questioned Setsuna about his tolerance towards them. Setsuna reassured her, explaining that he had managed to avoid triggering them thus far, so there hadn't been any issues. He confidently attributed the traps to Actor, noting Actor's cunning nature and ability to leave behind no evidence. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. The children gleefully handed them a bouquet of flowers. Layla addressed the girl, Aura, asking her about the situation. The boy beside her indicated that someone nearby had instructed him to deliver the flowers. Setsuna glanced in the direction the boy had pointed, but saw no one there. Layla questions the children why the person couldn't deliver the flowers themselves if they were alive and well. Ari, coughing and struggling to breathe, explains that the person claimed to be embarrassed. Shockingly, Ari releases the flower and admits feeling dizzy. Setsuna notices a black spot on Aria's neck, recalling similar spots from his past experiences on the battlefield before his regression. Setsuna's alarm bells ring. Without hesitation, he swiftly kicks the flower away. Layla, embracing Aura, inquires about the situation. Setsuna responds grimly, revealing that the flower was laced with a poisonous grass called venom. The boy begins to tremble and cough uncontrollably. Suddenly, all the children collapse to the floor, writhing in agony. Fuming with anger, Setsuna condemns Actor for involving innocent children in his schemes. Appalled by the depths to which Actor is willing to stoop, he urgently informs Layla that if they don't administer treatment to the children promptly, the situation will worsen irreversibly. However, he acknowledges the challenge of finding a healer capable of dealing with such a potent poison at this moment. Layla seeks confirmation from Setsuna about the urgency of the children's condition, to which he solemnly responds with a yes. He warns her to keep her distance, cautioning that there's a risk of the poison spreading even through proximity. Despite her fearful expression, Layla reassures Setsuna, reaching into her pocket. She reveals her brooch, explaining that it's a magic tool designed to store money. Layla further elucidates that her mother had imbued it with healing magic specifically for emergencies. Using the brooch, Layla begins to heal the afflicted children. Setsuna observes with relief as the dark spot fades away from Lara's neck. Layla explains to Setsuna that while her mother gave her the brooch as a gift, its true purpose shines in moments like these. Setsuna expresses his gratitude towards Layla for her quick thinking and resourcefulness. Acting swiftly, he seizes the poisonous flower and dashes away, urging Layla to keep her distance. Aware that venom grass is most potent when it blooms, he understands the urgency of disposing of it before it reaches that stage. However, he realizes that disposing of it in a crowded area would only cause the toxins to scatter. Racing out of the academy, he accelerates while clutching the venomous flowers, which are gradually blooming and infecting him in the process. Reaching the forest where the sacred tree stands, he knows it's the ideal location for disposal. As the venomous flower blooms fully, he hurls it into the air. Summoning a mono blade, he viciously slashes at the venomous flowers. Despite their widespread dispersion, the sacred tree's assistance prevents the toxin from scattering. Miraculously, the venomous flowers vanish before they can reach the ground, thanks to the intervention of the sacred tree. Meanwhile, in the arena, murmurs ripple through the audience. One man leans to his friend, inquiring if the representative for close combat has yet to appear. His friend speculates that perhaps Setsuna has fled. Just as the host is about to declare Setsuna's forfeiture and Actor's victory, a sudden interruption occurs. Setsuna's voice rings out, demanding the host to halt, catching Lionel and Drago off guard. Actor himself is taken aback as Setsuna arrives, visibly winded from his sprint. Setsuna, filled with fury, declares vehemently that he will not surrender. He challenges Actor to face him in combat. Actor merely chuckles at Setsuna's challenge, questioning whether he plans to fight in his current weakened state. As they step onto the stage, Actor smirks, insinuating that Setsuna has unwittingly accepted a congratulatory gift from him for winning the first round. Setsuna confronts Actor, condemning his actions and highlighting the innocent children affected by the deadly poison. Actor feigns ignorance, pretending to be unaware of the situation, and questioning Setsuna's claims. Setsuna clenches his fist in frustration as Actor mocks his passion for the matter. Actor callously asserts that even the children should be grateful for the opportunity to serve the elite, further infuriating Setsuna. Setsuna's anger boils over as he angrily calls out Actor's name. The host interrupts, announcing the commencement of the second round. Without hesitation, Actor launches an attack with Stormbella, prompting Setsuna to swiftly evade. Drago voices his concerns to Lionel about Actor's erratic behavior, noting the unrefined nature of Actor's mana. Understanding that the sacred tree's protection neutralized the venomous effects of the poison grass, he clutched his shoulder, yet aware that it couldn't fully cleanse the toxin coursing within him. In the distance, a multitude of mystical energies surged towards him. Swiftly, he leaped forward through time, evading their impending impact. Nevertheless, the Actor, with a grin, yelled, "Not yet!" and persistently launched assaults. Dodging each strike from the advancing Actor, he skillfully hopped between the stones, drawing nearer with each evasion. The host declared the ongoing close combat to be entirely defensive, yet Cyrus grinned, convinced that their meticulous preparation had proven its worth. Cyrus then warned him to brace himself for imminent humiliation. However, his gaze darted towards the audience, noting Layla's absence and hoping fervently for the safety of the children. With a playful demeanor, Hector cast another spell, casually inquiring if there was anything troubling him. Yet he merely caught his breath and remained silent. A student jestingly remarked that the representative for close combat seemed to be fleeing, prompting another to suggest they were incapable of handling opponents at a distance. Undeterred, the actor unleashed more magical assaults, tauntingly proposing that he consider conceding. However, he simply fortified his defenses with a mana guard, preparing to withstand the onslaught. Yet when the actor's magic pierced through his mana guard, it shattered, leaving him vulnerable to the impending strike. His blood seeped onto the ground as he suffered severe injuries and poisoning. The actor jeered at him, proclaiming that he was truly falling apart now. However, he simply fixed a stern gaze upon the actor, questioning why he hadn't yet delivered the final blow, causing confusion to ripple across the actor's face. Advising the actor, he suggested that the optimal strategy would involve avoiding close combat altogether, opting instead for relentless barrages of attacks. Expressing his frustration, he pointed out that the actor's actions had been purely provocative, demanding to know the true intent behind them. In response, the actor expressed surprise at being lectured on long-range tactics, yet acknowledged the astuteness of his observations, conceding that he was not to be underestimated. Suddenly, the actor commanded him to survey his surroundings, revealing that there were no longer any stones available for him to utilize in evasion. Shocked, he questioned when the actor had managed to enact this change in the environment. The actor explained that he had meticulously adhered to the principle of minimizing unnecessary risks over the years, indicating that this outcome had been his objective from the outset. With determination, the actor activated his storm cannon skill. Witnessing this, Drago and Lionel frowned with a mixture of panic and concern. Holding the storm cannon aloft, the actor confidently declared that his opponent's defeat was imminent. Abruptly, Layla's voice echoed from the audience's side, announcing that the children were now safe. This news brought a smile to his face as he tapped into his physical reserves, reassured by the safety of the children and his now fully healed body. With newfound confidence, he informed the actor that this moment marked his resurgence. Shocked, the actor demanded to know how he had managed to recover. Creating a mana blade, he calmly explained that his recovery wasn't as surprising as it seemed. He elaborated, revealing that it was a result of utilizing physical boosts and continuously activating his cells throughout the battle, effectively combating and neutralizing the effects of the poison. He then accused the actor of being short-sighted, revealing that while the actor was preoccupied with undermining his footing, he had unwittingly fallen into his trap, branding him a coward. Actor, with a stutter, cautioned him against becoming too confident and challenged him to prove his capabilities in such dire circumstances. In response, Cyrus emphatically affirmed the actor's challenge, commanding him to proceed with his next move. Actor complied, unleashing his storm cannon in his direction. Confronting the storm cannon head-on, he acknowledged the lack of stable footing and the scarcity of magical power remaining. Nevertheless, he assured the actor that it would be sufficient for him. With resolve, he swung his mana blade towards the oncoming storm cannon. Despite receiving slashes, he exerted all his strength and successfully redirected it back towards the actor. The actor was left stunned by this unexpected turn of events. Drago, witnessing the repulsion of the storm cannon, struggled to believe what had just occurred. Reacting swiftly, the actor thrust his hands forward, halting his storm cannon just before it could strike him. The actor challenged him, insinuating that he couldn't negate his own magic and asserting that his tactics had reached their limit, spelling the end for him. To the actor's astonishment, he materialized in front of him with his mana blade at the ready. He questioned the actor's doubt regarding his ability to traverse such distances. Overcome with fear and disbelief, the actor trembled. With a swift motion, he slashed the actor with his mana blade. Addressing the collapsed actor, he urged him to seek forgiveness from the children if he desired redemption. The host then declared Setsuna Cromwell as the winner. Drago beamed with pride, while Lionel finally lit his cigar in celebration. However, Drago's shock mounted as he observed the ground beneath them crumbling into pieces. Amidst the chaos, the students frantically cried out as they witnessed both him and the actor plummeting towards the lava below. As they descended, he realized with concern that the actor had lost consciousness, worsening the situation. Acting swiftly, he leaped to a nearby stone and grabbed hold of the actor's leg before they could descend into the molten lava. Panic set in for both him and Kirsten. Suddenly, a call rang out for Fenrir, and a beast swooped in just in time to catch them. It became apparent that it was Carol's summoning magic at work. The audience erupted into cheers as Fenrir successfully rescued them from the perilous fall, Safely landing on solid ground, Carol affectionately praised her beast for its swift action, while he received medical attention. Carol glanced at him and remarked that he seemed to be recovering well, even without her assistance. He gratefully assured her that she had indeed come to his rescue. He recognized Carol from the summoning department as a strong contender for the championship, noting her blend of talent and style. As Carol continued her winning streak, he began bracing himself for an intense competition ahead. The students were astonished by the repeated victories of the close combat representative. Their disbelief grew as they pondered whether it was merely luck, and speculated that if it persisted, it would be truly unprecedented. While the headmaster observed him silently and with intrigue, conversely, Cyrus seethed with rage, berating the actor as worthless. Cyrus then vocally vowed that this incident would never be forgotten. After a brief interval, refreshed and changed, Layla commended him, mentioning that Drago had been informed of the situation by Layla. Inquiring about the children's condition, he learned from Layla that they were currently resting in the infirmary. Layla assured him that the doctor predicted their swift recovery. Expressing his relief, he acknowledged understanding the situation. Suddenly, a sense of foreboding gripped him, causing a momentary shock. Hastily glancing back, he sought to identify the source. Observing his reaction, Layla inquired if anything was amiss, to which he responded in the negative. Nevertheless, he pondered the chilling sensation he had just experienced, sensing an aura of magic imbued with lethal intent. He couldn't help but question what hidden dangers might lurk within the tournament. Several days later, deep in the forest, he contemplated the approaching final match, realizing the necessity of confronting a new, mysterious force. Lost in thought about the power he sought, he was startled by the sound of someone approaching, pondering whether Lionel possessed the very power he sought. The approaching figure inquired about the reason for being called out and what was going on. Addressing him respectfully as Professor, he expressed his desire to seek guidance from Lionel once more. He then questioned whether he should refer to Lionel as the Fist of Comet, causing Lionel to react with surprise. Lionel acknowledged the name with nostalgia, curious about where it had been heard. Realization dawned upon him that the person before him was indeed Lionel. Recalling that Fist of Comet was a nickname prevalent in the Magic Corps before his memory lapse, he remembered Lionel as a renowned close combat expert, rumored to have vanquished even the most formidable dragons with a single strike, though they had never fought side by side due to Lionel's departure from the army before his own arrival. Their recent interaction had reignited his contemplation about their past association. He proceeded to bow before Lionel, earnestly requesting to learn the secrets of his magic. Lionel mentioned that it had been quite some time since he had been known as the Comet's Fist. In response, he dismissed the significance of time, asserting that among all the close combatants he had encountered, Lionel stood as the strongest. Lionel questioned his insatiable pursuit of power despite already possessing considerable strength. He countered, expressing dissatisfaction with his current level of strength and an adamant refusal to accept defeat against anyone, even a deity. Even if faced with a god as an opponent, he remained determined not to be surpassed. Lionel regarded him silently for a moment, then broke into a smile, remarking on his intriguing character. After a brief pause, Lionel jovially acknowledged his uniqueness. Lionel extended his arm, agreeing to impart his knowledge, though noting that typically such techniques weren't taught to individuals still undergoing physical growth. Lionel clenched his hand around his amassed wealth. He observed a substantial sum of money accumulating within Lionel's grasp. As Lionel gathered the money, the ground beneath them fissured, revealing the essence of why he bore the title, Comet's Fist. However, this magic demanded a considerable amount of mana, limiting its repeated use. Lionel emphasized the importance of attentiveness, stating that a single execution sufficed, urging him to observe closely. He shielded his face as Lionel unleashed his fist, unleashing formidable power. With a half-smoked cigar dangling from Lionel's lips, he witnessed the ground shatter, not from the impact of Lionel's fist, but from the sheer force emanating from it. Astonished by the display of immense power, he smiled in wonder. Lionel elucidated that the technique necessitated a continual accumulation of mana, unsuitable for one-on-one confrontations typical of tournaments. He then inquired if he still wished to proceed. Affirmatively, he assured Lionel of his commitment, expressing reliance on him for guidance. Lionel agreed, instructing him to follow along as they would commence training immediately. Meanwhile,
Within Carol's opulent mansion,
a gentleman extended his congratulations to her for advancing to the finals, to which she graciously responded. Inquiring about her confidence, the gentleman noted her opponent's proficiency in close combat. She acknowledged the role of luck in determining victory or defeat, but affirmed her determination to give her best performance. Offering another cup of tea, she received the gentleman's gratitude as she rose, carrying the tray. As she stood up with the tea tray, the gentleman retrieved something from his pocket, revealing a paper bearing an emblem. Extracting an item from his pocket, the man produced a paper adorned with an emblem. Gesturing behind her, he directed attention to the emblem, causing her to wince in pain as it marked her nape. Overwhelmed by the sensation, she collapsed, the tray slipping from her grasp, while the man rose from his seat. Asserting that victory or defeat mattered little to him, he acknowledged their plans would adapt to changing circumstances. The video concluded with his cryptic statement, leaving viewers intrigued about what would unfold next.